two sects that agree with each other. The truth that there is but one sect that has the gift is an absolute reality. And while you may choose to keep the Sabbath commandment, you cannot inspire yourself with the spirit of prophecy. This gift is bestowed upon the remnant by God Himself. 2TJ 34, page 23. The mere fact that it is called the gift of the spirit of prophecy or the prophetic gift, it is not acquired. That is the absolute prerogative of God, unto whom He will bestow such gift. But wherever that prophetic gift is found, that is the movement recognized by heaven as His movement. Remember, brethren, the only movement that will not be swallowed by the dragon's blood are the movement by which the living spirit of prophecy is active in their midst. It says here in 2TJ 24:23, the remnant that are left unto whom the gift of the spirit of prophecy had been bestowed, God bestowed unto the remnant. 2TJ 34:23. And then it says, the remnant that are left, the saints who were not swallowed by the dragon's flood as the earth opened her mouth, you note, have the testimony of Jesus Christ, the living spirit of prophecy, active in their midst. Can a faithful Davidian study the shepherd's rod? What does it mean? The living spirit of prophecy is active in their midst. Does the shepherd's rod teach us that when the prophet is dead, the living prophecy is still active? We need to stick what the shepherd's rod teaches. Now let us read answerer number 3, page 60. Answerer number 3, page 60. Upon the death of Sister White in 1915, the gift of inspiration, the active spirit of prophecy became quiescent, no longer manifesting itself for a time. Now tell me, would you think this statement cannot be applied in 1955 when B.T. Hotep died? The gift of inspiration, the active spirit of prophecy became quiescent, no longer manifesting itself for a time. Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. It says, with the church thus cut off from the very source of its life, as was the Jewish church from the death of the prophet Malachi to the rise of John the Baptist, how could it maintain its vitality and growth? Hence, now as then, there has followed the same inevitable spiritual malnutrition and deformity accompanied with a long train of woes. Do you believe this statement? That the result, when the prophet died, there is always inevitable. The word inevitable meaning unavoidable. The result is spiritual malnutrition, spiritual deformity, and it is accompanied with a long train of woes. You see? Long train of woes. Brothers and sisters, sometimes there is a statement in the shepherd's rod by which, in reality, the application cannot be applied to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. For example, I would like to read to you Jezreel letter. And study sincerely if this statement and to whom it is directly applied. It says in Jezreel letter number 7, page 4. Jezreel letter number 7, page 4. As the denomination has no progress in truth since the death of her heaven-called founder. Now tell me, is this statement exactly fits to the Seventh-day Adventist Church? That the denomination has no progress in truth since the death of her heaven-called founder. Who is the heaven-called founder in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Sister White. Is it in 1915 that there is no more progress in truth in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Study Ezekiel 4. B.T. Hotep says in 1890 there was no more progress of truth in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but at that time Sister White was still alive. I would like to read Answerer number 1, page 93. It says, 40 years without refilling. Then this is the question. How can it be true that no progressive truth was given to the church during the 40-year period from 1890 to 1930, when so many of Sister White's writings were published from 1890 to 1915? So the questioner is now questioning the doctrines of B.T. Hotep that in 1890, there was no more progress in truth in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and this questioner saying, how could it be? In 1890, Sister White published many writings. How many years from 1890 to 1915? That is 25 years. So within that 25 years, I think more or less, there are more than 40 inspired writings that had been published by Sister White. So the questioner cannot accept such doctrine. And this is the answer given by B.T. Hotep. Answer. Though many of Sister White's manuscripts were published during the period of time stated above, yet a careful check will reveal that if any new revelation of timely Bible truth meet in due season was published therein, it was revealed to her before 1890. In fact, as early as 1871, she herself announced this cessation of light through the testimonies, saying, I am authorized from God to tell you that not another ray of light through the testimonies will shine upon your pathway until you make a practical use of the light already given. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 606. So in the light of that reading, we can immediately discern that Jezreel letter number 7, page 4 cannot be applied to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but rather to the Davidian denomination, because the experience of the Davidian from the time 1929 to 1955, the progress of truth is continuous. Unlike with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, at the time when the heavenly called founder was still alive in 1890, there was no more progress in truth. If we will say that this is applied to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, then the declaration of that questioner will be justified. Then, Ezekiel 4 would be erroneous. That 40 years, no progress of truth. So if the progress of truth stopped when Sister White died in 1915, then there must be only 15 years, not 40 years. So if you will study this reading in Jezreel letter number 7, page 4, although it was applied by B.T. Hotep to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but in the light of today, we can easily discern that in reality, it is a projection concerning the Davidian movement. I would like to read again, Jezreel letter number 7, page 4. As the denomination has made no progress in truth, when? Since the death of her heaven-called founder. When does the Seventh-day Adventist Church no progress in truth? 1890. So you cannot use the statement, since the death. Because at that time, Sister White was still alive. As the denomination has made no progress in truth since the death of her heaven-called founder, that is pointing to the Davidian, it is obvious that she has nothing to boast about, that she is retrograding and is as dead spiritually as were the Jews from the time of the prophet Malachi's death to John the Baptist's appearance in the wilderness of Judea. Then it says, the line of communication between her and God is cut off. As it was in John's time, she can no more now serve her members meat in due season than could the Jews without the prophets. Her blindness to this fact and her assumption that she is in need of nothing make her wound incurable. Brethren, that statement is very clear. No one can feed her members meat in due season without the presence of the prophet. Because present truth comes only from God. 11 Symbolic Code, number 3, page 5. And how could you be able to obtain present truth without the channel? The only channel by which the present truth is channeled by God, it is through inspiration. It is through the inspired servant of God. That is very plain. And our blindness to that absolute fact and still assume that we have need of nothing make our case incurable before God. And the result is that you will be boastful. It says here in 1 TG, number 15. On page 5, having deprived themselves of the gift of the spirit of prophecy by doing away with the prophets, they completely cut off heaven's communication line and were thus left in gross darkness and lead into error, fanaticism, and crime. They become self-sufficient, proud, boastful, and high-minded. 1 TG number 15, page 5. Here in 2 TG number 24, the statement says, brethren, page 22, 2 TG number 24, page 22, it says, if they do awake to their poverty. What poverty? Spiritual poverty. If they do awake to their poverty, it will be the greatest miracle since the beginning of the world. I say it will be the greatest because they feel no need of God's help through inspiration. You want God's help? God's help is channeled through inspiration. So, the statement in answer 3, page 29 and 30, saying, to put God out of sight, any objection against inspiration is to put God out of sight. And would you think you are not boastful? You don't need God's help? Because you think your knowledge, your wisdom is sufficient enough? That is the mystery of iniquity. When God the Father assembled all the angels, God informed all the angels, if there's something that you want to know, everything that you can see. If you want to need explanation, come to my son. He will be the one to explain to you everything. But the mystery of iniquity declared Lucifer, saying, I don't need the Son of God. I can understand. Brethren, we need God's help. Here in track number 6, page 80, I would like to read to you, track number 6, page 80. Therefore, brethren, settle it once and forever, that with the Lord's help, you will no longer be carried away by winds of doctrine that are created and driven by the spirit of error, not by the spirit of truth, but that you will always look for and stand by the inspired word of God, the testimony of Jesus delivered to you by the spirit of prophecy. Who delivered to you the testimony of Jesus? By the spirit of prophecy, that you will hear the rod, and who hath appointed it? Micah 6 verse 9. Who is the author of the rod? God, not Jehovah. It is called the rod of God. Exodus 4:20 and 21. And God himself appointed Jehovah to handle the word of God, his word. But when Jehovah died, God himself will appoint antitypical Joshua. Brethren, truth is truth and sense is sense. Let us have them both. The voice of inspiration says that typological truths is God's searchlight. It says here in 2SR page 267, a great searchlight by the power of the Spirit shining through the types is the only medium that can remove the obstruction and clear the way to an understanding of this and many other mysteries that are considered incomprehensible and that baffle the human mind. 2SR page 267. And the voice of inspiration says, in 1SR Pocket Edition, on page 73, it says, so completely disarming the enemy of souls, the great designer of these typological truths leaves the reader free to make his own choice as to whether he will continue in the darkness or come out into the light of the Lord, no longer to wonder what church to join or what is truth and what is error. So through typological truths, the great designer of that typological truths completely disarmed the enemy of souls. Therefore, if you will stick through the typological truths, the enemy of souls will completely disarm, according to the Shepherd's Rod publications. How could you ascertain clearly that that movement is of God? Through typological truths. The voice of inspiration says, the only type of the second Advent movement is the first Exodus. Let us read the statement. First in 1SR. Let me read to you. In 1SR page 68, it says, the Exodus movement is in a way a type photograph of the closing work of God under the Advent movement. Its movement rises in fulfillment of time prophecy. The fact that Israel after the flesh is a type photograph, their experience must be duplicated by the truth. Otherwise, there can be no type. And it is even more clearer in 1TG number 7 by saying on page 3, it says, a number of brethren have written to me from time to time, wanting to know what makes them eligible to receive the seal of God. Some want to know whether they will be sealed by doing this or by doing that. Other wants to know whether they will be left without the seal by not doing this or not doing the other. The questions are indeed very timely and commendable. Such vital questions deserve answers as concrete as are the questions themselves. And who can give a more concrete answer than those who have gone before us? Those whose duties were similar to ours. Those who were passing through a similar experience. Those who traveled the same road that we are traveling. Those who were preparing themselves for the kingdom as are we. In whom do we find such a parallel? In no others than those who left Egypt and started for the promised land. No, in none others. They are our only type. The shepherd's rod is very plain. They are our only type. There is no other type. You want to ascertain clearly what movement to enlist to make sure of your salvation? According to track number 14, let me read to you. Track number 14 on page 22. It says, but also a suggestive statement. Track number 14, page 22. But also a suggestive statement as to what constitutes meat in due season for men today, and as to what movement they are to enlist in if they would make sure of salvation. You want to make sure of your salvation? Ascertain clearly what movement you are to enlist in. And of course, the only movement that you need to enlist in must be the movement which is duplicate with the Exodus movement. Now, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. I would like to read here 1TG number 7. 1TG number 7, page 12. What made one group eligible to cross the Jordan? It did not say, what made two groups? There is only one group eligible to cross the Jordan River. And what made that group eligible to cross the Jordan? It was their trust in God, knowing that He was their chief leader. They recognized Moses and Joshua as the ones through whom God was communicating with them. They did not look upon them as being anyone other than who they actually were. They were satisfied with their lot. They took orders as the orders were given. So it was that they were the only ones who entered into the land. Who are they? By which they recognize as the one through whom God was communicating? Only Moses and Joshua. So the movement in the type is divided only into two sections. The first section is led by Moses. The second section is led by Joshua. Here is the absolute answer to find the true movement. Only by the type. Completely disarm the enemy of inspiration. Now let me read to you track number 9. Track number 9 on page 72. It says, a threefold typification in triple accord with God's law of type, that where there is type, there must also be antitype. How many typification? Threefold. And I think that statement is definitely applied in the Exodus movement in the antitype. In the type, there is only one Moses. There is only one Joshua. But in the antitype, there are 3 antitypical Moses and 3 antitypical Joshua. Now let us go first to the antitypical Moses. The first Moses is, of course, that would be Sister White. Here in 1 SR 110, it says, Moses at the age of 40 years attempted to deliver Israel and failed. Adding 40 years to 1850, we have 1890. What happened at that time? The following statement was made by Sister White in 1892. So that is the first part of the life of Moses, 1850 to 1890. Then, what is the other 40? 40 years later, Moses was called and sent back to Egypt, did set Israel free from the Egyptian bondage. Adding 40 to 1890 brings a total to 1930. What happened to 1930? At the age of 80, God gave to antitypical Moses the rod of God. That is why here in answerer number 3, let's read page 21. Thus we see that it was not until after the murmurers were eliminated in the example that Joshua took over and led the Exodus movement in the land of Canaan. Accordingly, in the antitype, the period before the rod came, the Laodicean period. But what Laodicean period? The typical Laodicean period. So, I would like to show to you again, brothers and sisters, because the truth is so simple. 1850 to 1890. 1890 to 1930. So this is the first Moses, or then the second Moses. At the age of 80, received the shepherd's rod. But 1930 to 1955, 25 years, no, it is not pointing to the life of Moses, but to the life of Joshua. Because Bethihotep has also counterpart of Joshua. Now, let us now enumerate one by one. The threefold typification of Moses. Moses. The first Moses is Ellen G. White. The second Moses is Bethihotep. Who are they? The third Moses. Of course, the third Moses is the last Moses. Now, let us read the shepherd's rod. in 1SR. Here in 1SR, on page 94, this last Moses is the unlearned Moses. So this must be the third Moses because this is the last Moses. 1SR page 94. This last Moses is the unlearned Moses. The shepherd Moses is a type of men who are to bring about reformation and be used in the time of the loud cry. Who are they? The last Moses. No longer singular type of men. Without any doubts, they are the faithful associates of B.T. Hotep. Faithful associates. And that is from 1955, 40 years, the last 40 in the life of antitypical Moses up to 1995. This is typifying God's people eating manna in the wilderness, the same food every day. Therefore, when in 1955 to 1995, God did not send any new truth within this period of time. Because it is typifying God's people eating manna every day, the same food. But how about Joshua? There must be also threefold typification. Who is the first Joshua? Alonzo Jones. The second Joshua, B.T. Hotep. So, through typological truths, we can easily discern that after B.T. Hotep died, there must be only one prophet to follow after him, and that is the last antitypical Joshua. This one is the last antitypical Moses. This one is the last antitypical Joshua. So through typological truths, brothers and sisters, we can immediately discern that the Davidian movement, by which there are many inspired, so-called inspired servants that they acknowledge cannot be of God. There is no prophecy at all that when B.T. Hotep died, God will raise up more than one prophet. But rather, there is only one prophet that God will raise up after B.T. Hotep died. In the Exodus movement, that must be antitypical Joshua, but in other instances, B.T. Hotep is antitypical Elijah John the Baptist, and the last prophet must be antitypical Elijah the Tishbite. But on the other side, the movement of B.T. Hotep from 1930 to 1955 is antitypical Jesse, and the movement that arose when B.T. Hotep died in 1955 must be the 7 antitypical brothers of David. So in such allegorical events, it was allowed by God that the Davidian will be divided to fulfill the 7 antitypical brothers of David. So the last and the final movement must be led by antitypical David. You see, brothers and sisters, through typological truths, it's easy to discern. Brethren, if you fully believe the Exodus movement as our type, this is the statement given by B.T. Hotep. Let me read to you. 3 Symbolic Code 11 to 12, page 9. 3 Symbolic Code 11 to 12, page 9. as a people will lack faith. In these days, few would follow the direction given through God's chosen servant as obediently as did the armies of Israel at the taking of Jericho. The captain of the Lord's host did not reveal himself to all the congregation. He communicated only with Joshua, who related the story of this interview to the Hebrews. It rested with them to believe or to doubt the words of Joshua, to follow the commands given by him in the name of the captain of the Lord's host, or to rebel against his direction and deny his authority. Volume 4, page 162. So in the Exodus movement, there was no such example that you could show that God revealed himself through the entire congregation. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, God revealed himself through Sister White. In the days of B.T. Hotep, God revealed himself through B.T. Hotep. Would you think the last generation, the 144,000 living saints, brethren, God would not raise up divinely called inspired servant? Brethren, we are nearing home. Because type and antitype cannot be mistaken. As we already showed to you, this proof is infallible because it is time prophecy. So from 1955 plus 40, that is 1995, then it must be in 1996 that God raised up antitypical Joshua. And since God, in the typological events, there must be only 25 years, although in the antitype is broader in scale because Joshua of old died. But antitypical Joshua, the last and antitypical Joshua, will no longer to taste death. 1996 plus 25, then you will fall in 2021. Therefore, we are now in the prophetic year. We are now in the borders of the kingdom. And to repeat again, September 22, 2022, that is the midnight deliverance of God's people to the literal premillennial kingdom. If we will be faithful, all of us will be in God's kingdom. The premillennial, physical, literal kingdom. Now, how about this statement in 1TG number 8? Can anyone consider this statement in 1TG number 8? On page 23, it says, the first one to be given the garment is Joshua, the high priest, the highest official in the church. Now, brothers and sisters, ponder deeply. Who is this Joshua? If you say, that is B.T. Hotep. Is B.T. Hotep is the highest official in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? The movement of B.T. Hotep is not a church. It is an association. And this Joshua, God would raise up at the time when the 8th church will emerge. And how could it be that B.T. Hotep is the antitypical Joshua mentioned here in 1TG 8:23, while in reality, the movement that had been launched by B.T. Hotep within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the result is that another church emerged. The statement result meaning the outcome. Now let me read to you 1TG number 8, page 24. Obviously, then, as a result, the word result is always at the end, not at the beginning. There is no such result. Let me see if we could define in dictionary the word result. But it's easy to understand the word result. That is the outcome. This reading is easy to understand because of the untiring effort and fervent zeal employed by the prophet. So the word result, what is the definition? Product. Yeah, the product. So that is result. And some of the answer, it says, so also very limited. There are other dictionaries saying the outcome. Now, let's go back to the reading. It says, 1TG number 8, page 24. Obviously, then, as a result of this revival and reformation within the Laodicean church, another church emerges, of which is Joshua is in charge, not the angel of Laodicea. So this church cannot be the Seventh-day Adventist church, and this church, result of that effort launched by B.T. Hotep, a movement within a movement, that is, there is an association raised by God within the Laodicean church, and through that association that had been launched through the guidance of God, through the medium of B.T. Hotep, the outcome, the result, the product came out, the predicted church. By which that predicted church, Joshua is the highest official in that church. Because in Desire of Ages, let me read to you. The Desire of Ages, page 133. It says here, in Desire of Ages, page 133, saying that the high priest is usually the president. The high priest was usually the president. Desire of Ages 133. So that church, there must be a president. So those movements by which there is no president, it cannot be of God. Because the church that God would raise up in the last generation of men, the 11th-hour church, the 8th church in the New Testament succession, the high priest is Joshua, and the high priest is usually the president, the highest official. Brothers and sisters, I think the evidences are in abundance. Sufficient evidences. So, to repeat again, here in 2TG 24, page 22, it says, if they do awake to their poverty, it will be the greatest miracle. 2TG 24:22. If they do awake to their poverty, it will be the greatest miracle since the beginning of the world. I say it will be the greatest because they feel no need of God's help. How God channel His help? Through inspiration. It says, they feel no need of God's help through inspiration. Expect none, are prejudiced, suspicious, and fearful of everyone that disagree with their preconceived idea. They are therefore even harder to reach with the saving truth for today than were the Jews of yesterday. But I do fully believe what inspiration says in 2 TG 24:23. It says, the church therefore will not sleep forever. The church therefore will not sleep forever. The true people of God will awake to their poverty. They will profit at this rousing call. So the true people of God, they will be awakened to their spiritual poverty. Because it was already predicted beforehand. There is no problem from 1955 to 1995. Because God, it is the divine will of God that there will be no new truth within that period of time. Because they were illustrated as God's people eating manna in the wilderness. Meaning the same food every day. The same food. No new truth. But after the 40 years, God raised up Joshua, and at that time they were eating different fruits according to the historical event. The manna ceased, and they began to eat different fruits. Typifying in 1996 when God raised up Joshua, antitypical Joshua. And there is a time prophecy according to 1 SR page 68. And that is why, brethren, we are so certain. If we will not reach into the kingdom in 2022, then this movement must be a false movement. But the absolute fact is that it cannot be mistaken. Because the statement used by the shepherd's rod, unmistakable language, infallible proof. Type and antitype exactly fits and perfectly match. And the typical representation can never be mistaken. So, brethren, we are nearing home, and I do fully believe that there must be 144,000. The only question is that, are we among that special number? Life is but what we make it. It says in White House Recruiter on page 45, for worse or for better, brethren, you are now in the blessing light of God's word, left to make your own decision. Whatever it be, though you will never have a just cause, either to exalt or to blame another for it, the responsibility is now entirely yours. Life is just but what we make it. 1 TG number 50, page 20. And it says, all perish as fools because they failed. 1 TG number 50. On page 15. Life is but what we make it. But all perish as fools only because they have failed to give heed to present truth, had failed to feed on meat in due season. What folly! What disaster! 1TG number 50, page 15. So, hoping, brethren, that we will be awakened to such spiritual poverty, because God will supply us abundance of spiritual riches, abundance of present truth. We can guarantee to you, there is an abundance of present truth. Thank you very much, brethren. We love you, hoping to see you in God's kingdom. May the good Lord bless you, and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.